So there's a container of secrets, and there's the major secrets and the minor secrets.
Keep watching to learn more.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we'll be exploring the topic of tarot. And my guest, Mary K. Greer, has been studying and teaching tarot for the last half century. I think it's probably fair to say she is the premier teacher of tarot in the United States, at least. She is the author of 11 books on tarot and on magic. They include Tarot for Yourself, a workbook for personal transformation. Women of the Golden Dawn, Rebels and Priestesses. The Essence of Magic, Tarot, Ritual, and Aromatherapy. And Mary K. Greer's 21 Ways to Read a Tarot Card. She has taught tarot for 11 years at the New College of California, and she has a master's degree in English literature from the University of Central Florida, where she first taught tarot in 1974. Mary lives in California, and now I'll switch over to the internet video. Welcome, Mary. It is a pleasure to be with you.
It's wonderful to be here. I'm so happy to talk with you.
Well, you've been talking about tarot for nearly half a century, and I gather you haven't gotten tired of it.
Not for a moment.
That's really amazing. And another really fascinating fact I learned going through some of your books is that your great-grandmother was a card reader.
That's what I've been told, and it wasn't until shortly before my mother died that she mentioned it. They lived just outside of New Orleans, and people would come to the house, and my mom would be sent out into the backyard while her grandmother would read some kind of cards. My mother doesn't remember what kind, to help them with their troubles.
And I imagine New Orleans was a city in which this kind of paranormal activity was more or less accepted.
Yes, it was. And actually, my great-grandmother was part of the German railroading group. So there's a very good chance they were the Lenormand cards, with, 36 playing card designs.
That's one of your areas of expertise, is all of the different decks and the history of tarot. Now, in this program, New Thinking Aloud, we've been on YouTube for 10 years. We've touched upon tarot only peripherally in a couple of interviews, for example, one on the poetry of Sylvia Plath. But our readers may not know much about tarot, and one of the points you make is that it's really central to the whole tradition of magic in the Western esoteric culture, particularly the Order of the Golden Dawn.
Definitely central in the Order of the Golden Dawn, and to other groups, it's kind of on a side item. But following the Golden Dawn tradition, you have to know the tarot. It's all part of the correspondences, Hebrew letters, numbers, astrological signs, and tarot and the whole structure of their initiations.
Well, I guess it begs the question in a way, because I know I'm going to have some viewers who have never heard of the Order of the Golden Dawn. So it was enormously influential, particularly around the turn of the 20th century. Perhaps you could just amplify on that a little bit. Why is the Golden Dawn important, and what role did tarot play in their system of ritual magic?
Oh, so it was founded in 1888 by three Freemasons that were exploring more of the magical ritual aspects of magic. So there was a man who liked to start magical orders. Supposedly he had secrets that he had obtained from a mid-19th century French magician, Eliphas Levi, and that he had continued to develop on his own and was going to write a book about it. But when one of the members, one of the people who formed the Golden Dawn, asked him, "Where is your work on the tarot?" he said, "If I revealed this was Kenneth Mackenzie, if I revealed this, it would be dangerous to all society." So the minute he died, Westcott went to the wife and claimed all the papers that Kenneth Mackenzie had. And that formed the basis. There's some argument about where this is the source of the manuscript, but there was a manuscript in code that was deciphered by the founding members of the Golden Dawn. And in it, it had a whole system for tarot that followed the initiatory levels of the magical organization. And it restructured the tarot in that the Fool, which was usually considered to be the last card in the tarot, the 22nd card, unnumbered though, so it was a big zero. The Golden Dawn, through this manuscript, put it first, and that changed everything. So that's the tradition of the Golden Dawn, and the core argument is where the Fool goes. But they also changed two of the numberings of the cards, 8 and 11, strength and justice, two of the three virtues that are shown in the cards. So there's, one of the things is the secrets. Each order, magical group that used tarot had some secret about the tarot. And that's their kind of founding document piece. The Golden Dawn one has, I think, survived. There's also a French tradition that's very strong in Europe, but a lot of people vary that according to their own beliefs. And with the Golden Dawn, it tends to be pretty much fixed. So the Thoth deck and the Rider-Waite Smith deck, two most popular decks in the English-speaking world today, and in most of Asia, a lot of the world, come from this Golden Dawn tradition.
One of the unique features of the Golden Dawn system is this table of correspondences, which I know you've published in one of your books, where every tarot card is linked, as you mentioned, with a Hebrew letter, with a sign of astrology or one of the planets of astrology, and with the entire structure of the Kabbalistic diagram known as the Tree of Life.
Yes, definitely. And they even go further into perfumes and scents and different gods and goddesses from different traditions and so on. Yeah, it gets very elaborate. But the basics are what most people focus on. Number, astrology, and some basic Hebrew concepts on the Tree of Life.
So in this sense, one could say that the tarot is really central to Western esoteric culture, at least through the lens of the Golden Dawn. But one of the things you point out is that originally tarot was more of a card game than a system of divination.
Oh, definitely. It was created somewhere between 1420 and 1440 in northern Italy, where it was the earliest examples we have, because we don't know if common woodcut cards were just thrown away. But the earliest ones that we have for the first 50 years or more are these beautiful gold encrusted, hand-painted cards. That there's 3. None of them are complete, but there's 3 decks that we can mostly go to, and then some individual cards. But all indications are that they were simply a card game, often used according to the images that we see them in, the wall paintings and other indicators. It was something that men and women in the courts could play these card games and get to know each other. So they often were given as gifts during weddings, these beautiful hand-encrusted ones.
And you would want to save a gift like that, I suppose. And even today, the use of tarot as a way of getting to know another person or getting to know yourself is still, I assume, a major purpose to which these cards are applied.
Yes, and one of the games that was just done in the courts was this poetry making game. So what would happen is that they would draw different of the major arcana, or trump cards as they were known. They would draw them for the different women in the court. And then on the spot, these poets were supposed to make up a poem where they associated the card drawn for the person in terms of their personality characteristics. So, I mean, today, when people say, well, what are cards used for? When we do readings, part of it is personality characteristics, as shown by cards that are particular to them.
A game in which a person makes up a poem about a person based on the card or a series of cards is very much like a reading.
Yes, I would say so. I mean, they did it as, a fun, lighthearted thing in the court, one of the poetry games that I'm sure they played lots of different ones. But we have at least, I think, 2 records of these poems that were created.
And now I think it's probably fair to say that you have personally done well over 1,000, maybe close to 100,000 tarot readings.
I have no idea of how many I've done. I know people who have kept track of their readings, how many there are. That's not me. I just go with the flow.
Central points you made is the idea of a sacred space, that this is a sacred process. It needs to be treated respectfully to get the best results.
Well, I think respect is central to almost anything that we do. And if you do it with that in mind, that's the best option. My general sense of tarot is, as long as people treat it with respect, whatever they're doing with it, whatever draws them to it is fine. It's an indicator of their own path. Hopefully they'll stay with it long enough to explore a lot of its different byways and kind of develop themselves with it. So I try not to have rules around it. Personally, there's certain rules I would prefer, but I'm going to let it go, because if somebody's doing something special and wonderful with the cards, even if it's building what do you call it when you put cards to build up a little house?
A house of cards.
Yeah, even doing that's okay. The main thing is respect in what you do with it, and hopefully the willingness to learn and keep growing with them.
I seem to recall a quote attributed to you, which is, rules are meant to be broken.
Break every rule and then find out which rules you want to keep for yourself personally, which ones you can let go of. There's one rule, which I don't know where it came from, which is that you can't buy the first tarot deck for yourself. I bought my first tarot deck, and I am so glad that I did. So, and I would say the majority of people I know did buy their first tarot deck. But it was terrible for bookstore owners, because so many of them through the years have had people come in to steal a deck, because that was another one of that you had to steal it. I mean, there's some insane rules out there. And it's just like now with fake news. I don't know why people want to create these things that are harmful somewhere along the line. To me, do what works well for you and for the well-being of others, including plants and animals and the planet.
One of the conflicts in the tarot community would be between people who say you've got to do it the traditional way, or you're just making it all up and you're not going to be in touch with the deeper truths that are available through tarot, and other people who say throw out all the traditions and just make it up as you go along. That way you're in touch with your intuition, which is what it's really about.
I would hope that people that really connect with the tarot will do a lifelong learning. For me, it's been 56 years, and I periodically go in a direction that I had always kind of either rejected or thought that, that's not my style, that's not for me. And I've spent periods, a year, 2 years, even 3 years, studying something that came hard for me and expanded my knowledge, which is why I think I don't have those restrictions on it, because I've found value in almost all the different traditions and ways that people use tarot.
Let's talk about the cards themselves. You mentioned that the two primary decks that seem to be of the most influence in North America, let's say, would be both of which came out of the Golden Dawn tradition. One designed by Aleister Crowley with an artist, I think, named Lady Frida Harris, if I recall correctly. Another one by his colleague, Arthur Edward Waite, working with an artist named Pamela Coleman Smith, if I recall correctly.
Yes, and Waite and Smith did their deck in 1909. Crowley and Frida Harris spent several years during the war working on their deck, which was completed in 1945, I believe. So, quite, and there are generational difference, of course, in the two of them. So Crowley is actually born even after Pamela Coleman Smith, who was 20 years younger than Waite. So, it's a different generation. I consider the Waite deck actually coming out of the 19th century, especially that very end of the 19th, going into the 20th century. And that Crowley and Frida Harris's deck would be a 20th century deck, coming out of, they worked on it during the war. And Frida Harris would say, they mostly corresponded with letters. And she said that when there was an Allied victory, she happened to be working on the card called Victory. And when there was an Allied defeat, she happened to be working on the card that was named Defeat in the Golden Dawn system.
What happened since the Crowley-Harris deck came out, we now have something like 8,000 or 9,000 different tarot decks on the market.
That's probably conservative in some ways if you take it over a long period of time, of the second half of the 20th century up to now. Part of it is the self-publishing options that we have nowadays. So everybody can create their own deck, and you can order it directly from the printers, so that, the creator of the deck doesn't have to expend thousands and thousands of dollars to produce it and figure out a way to sell it. There's all kinds of ways online. People contribute so that they've got the money to put it out in the first place, or to survive during the months that they're totally obsessed in creating the deck. But you also get a lot of decks that will probably not last 100 years, much less longer than that. And, that's okay. That's part of what is. Eventually, some people will rediscover some of these decks, and maybe some will be reborn.
Well, I think it's important to mention the French tradition. I am a devotee to some degree of the work of Alejandro Jodorowsky, who is an avant-garde filmmaker and a tarot reader. He uses tarot images in his movies, as a matter of fact, but he uses the Marseille deck, and he believes that he used to collect tarot decks. He said he threw them all out after he started working with the Marseille deck. He said that's the only one that is the real tarot. But let's talk about that tradition.
Oh, the French tradition. And I have read with the Marseille deck. I certainly use it in my research and in comparing it. Jodorowsky and many of the people working in with the Marseille deck use primarily the major arcana. Some of them have incorporated the minor arcana more. I did meet a Frenchman who had been taught by 3 Italian women, very ancient ones, and they told him that you use the major arcana only for very spiritual and personal development tool to understand yourself at a deep level. And you read the minor arcana alone for very mundane situations. And in his tradition, you do not read the two together. Now, many people do. But you also, I love it, you only read on certain days. And I remember them because of the days of the week in Spanish, where Sunday is Domingo, and therefore, it's, the Lord's Day, and you only read the major arcana for very important spiritual reasons on a Sunday. Monday is Lunes, Moon Day, and therefore you only read for, deep understanding, on the Moon Day and emotions and feelings. Tuesday is, Lunes Mars Day. See, I have to do it in Spanish. So it's Mars Day, and that's, minor arcana only, not the major arcana, and for big arguments and conflicts. So it goes on like that. Miércoles is Mercury's day, and therefore intellectual, educational kinds of things. Also, if there's buying and selling, there's other meanings for Mercury. Actually, Mercury's got a lot of meanings. And so, I admire these traditions, but I don't live by them. So for me, they're historical, and I like the thinking that goes along with them, so that there are special times.
You've introduced another term, major and minor arcana, that our viewers may not be familiar with. And I suppose it's fair to say that, like a regular deck of modern playing cards, tarot cards have 4 suits, but they also have the 22 cards of the major arcana, which are not ever included in a normal deck of playing cards.
Right. And I should modify this in that that's not a French term. That is a term that was used by the Golden Dawn, major arcana, minor arcana. Arcana means secrets, from like the Ark of the Covenant, which was a container. So there's a container of secrets, and there's the major secrets and the minor secrets. So that comes out of the idea that there is in the tarot a teaching, a book of secrets. In the French, it's the triumphs or the trump cards, the 22 majors, and then the regular playing cards. So, and different groups and people do have their understandings of the roles of these different ones. The modern use is in the people who use the Golden Dawn tradition decks, use both together.
The major and the minor. And the other aspect of reading the cards is how do you even begin? Do you choose a single card? Or I've heard the term spreads. There are many different ways of spreading the cards out, like on a table in a pattern, and then you read the whole pattern.
Exactly. Again, these things are going through lots of changes, but the idea is that you can draw a card a day, or a card that I might draw for, our dialogue, and something to remind me or be aware of. And then that expands as you're learning to 3 cards where you begin to integrate their meanings. But each position, 3 cards having 3 meanings for their positions, and each card is read in terms of your question, the card position meaning, and the meaning of the card. And some people get stuck there because how do you, if you've got a 3-card spread, it's often past, present, and future. Those are the 3 cards. Or body, mind, and spirit. Or you can begin expanding it into what does person A want? What does person B want? And how can they integrate it together? Or whatever middle card you want for their interaction. Or choice A, choice B, and something that will help you to choose. Or what's keeping you from making the decision between these two. So you can determine the meaning of any one of those cards. So the problem becomes when people see the question asked, the card position meaning, and the card as a message, and then the next card as a message, and the third card as a message. What happens with intuition is this idea of, and which is really a much older idea, is these cards all interact together. They interrelate. And that becomes the intuitive skill, which intuition can come in anywhere. You get a flash the minute you see a card. But it is especially important when you get the bigger story. And that's really been the focus of the second half of the 20th century and on now, is what is the story that's emerging here? So the spreads, and there's spreads that go up to, actually technically you could go up to the entire deck, but you can have a spread easily with all 22 major arcana cards, and their placement in relationship to each other can be read that way. And that's seen in the older playing card tradition, where you have often 36 cards, and there's a 36 card layout called the Grand Tableau, the great picture. And you find where you are in that general layout, and then everything relates to where you are. That becomes the position of the present, and the past is to one side, the future is to another, and the things that are affecting you most are all around you. So what I'm trying to say is that nowadays, you can choose the way in which you want to read the cards, depending on what's natural to you. As a beginner, start with 1 card, then 3 cards the next week, and stick with that for a couple of months if you want. And then you can go on to the traditional Golden Dawn non-order method, the method that the Golden Dawn members could use with people who were not part of the Golden Dawn and didn't understand their secrets, so you wouldn't tell them all about the Kabbalistic Hebrew letter associations. You wouldn't mention any of that. So you would use a spread called the Celtic Cross spread, which has past, present, future, but also what's on your mind and what's at the very base or root of the situation, which we would call the unconscious, and then a path of development that goes from there.
Another very important aspect of the cards are the images that appear on the cards themselves. These images are often very colorful, very complex, with many different elements to them. And one of the points that you make in one of your books is that these symbols embody the archetypes that were written about by the great Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. They are deep images, the kinds of things that would come up in a dream and that a person would remember. They're almost haunting in a certain way. The hanged man, the tower that is burning down, the devil. These are both positive and negative images that represent many of the essential trials and tribulations of human life.
Yes, and that we find not only in Jung's writing, but also in Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And so the different stages of life that can be seen through the 22 major arcana. So the archetypes are the archetypes of the collective unconscious, in that it's believed, and I think can be justified in many ways, to be found in the myths and stories of almost any culture, or they would say every culture, and in our dreams, and in the stories that we write, so that we recognize a mother archetype, even in a situation where the figure is not necessarily a mother, like the queen of a country is the mother of the country. Is there an archetypal chair? Whatever chair you picture in your mind is not actually the archetypal chair, not the archetype itself, but is archetypally related to chair. So somebody might see a beautiful, lounging chair, and somebody else might see a three-legged stool, from the Nordic countries in their designs. So you could have a whole range of them, but there's still something that people everywhere can point to and say, that's a chair in whatever language is their language. So that's the archetypes, and that they do follow certain patterns in the subconscious. They have certain roles in our lives. There can be a good mother and a bad mother. They're both part of that archetypal energy. The tarot defines major archetypes of family and interrelationships, as well as the great crises that we come to. And, may you live in interesting times, so that sometimes those crises can be both devastating and propel us onto another level of consciousness and learning. Have I covered the bases?
The images are very important, the meanings of the cards, but ultimately, when you're doing a reading, you're sitting next to or near or across from another person who has come for the reading. So essentially, a tarot reading is a dialogue between two people.
Ideally, it's a dialogue, and you can dialogue with yourself. Or you can dialogue with the figures in the cards. So I was the first person to write a book on reading tarot for yourself that gave actual processes for how to do it, and not just said, you can read for yourself, but most people don't. No, that wasn't ever true. People have always read for themselves, but it was one of the taboos of the tarot world. And so I kind of broke through it during the human potential movement in the 70s and 80s, that there are all kinds of tools that we use in our personal diary and self-understanding processes that we can use the cards for. And one of them is dialoguing with the cards. So yes, I consider it a dialogue, but that dialogue can happen in many ways. The thing about having a human that you're talking to, it works even over the phone, where we can hear a voice, of course, through, Zoom readings, as well as in-person readings, is that you can be seen. So if I'm a client coming for a reading, there's somebody who, in the majority of cases, is going to be empathic. That's why they got into doing this. So they really feel and understand the emotions. They also understand the different kinds of life situations, and have probably come across a great many of them that blew their minds at some point as they were starting out their reading for the public. And now, hopefully, if you've got somebody with some experience, they've heard everything. And so they accept that. They can see you and accept that. There's also ways you can get readings, like through AI now, where it's not somebody that's seeing you. It's not somebody that's had a lived experience. It has any kind of sensory experience of it. So each thing has its benefits. AI is available 24/7. That's its major advantage. But a human contact is part of our being human beings, I think.
As a parapsychologist, I would tend to think that what tarot does when it's working best is that it triggers the telepathic, intuitive abilities of the reader, that it's not so much what the book says that the card should mean. It's more that you get an insight when you're reading the card, and that insight has what parapsychologists call psi, the Greek letter psi. What that word represents to parapsychologists is clairvoyance, telepathy, precognition. So, in other words, the reader is functioning as a psychic.
I tend to see this whole range that goes, and it's not fixed positions, but empathy, intuition, which I see as a brain mechanism of knowledge and experience firing immediately, to what is generally termed psychic, which is sensory experiences, often on some way, mental, sensory, that there's nothing in the environment that would give that information. So, suddenly getting a scent and you're going, I don't know why I'm smelling rose. Oh, my grandmother wore rose perfume all the time. Or my favorite thing is to walk through my rose garden. These, psychics have different senses, and some can be more internal senses that they operate through. That's the clairs, clairvoyance, clairaudience, and so on. So we've gotten more sophisticated in our descriptions of these things, but I think it's kind of a continuum, and that some people tend to focus in a particular area through training, can develop to another area, and some people are genius in certain parts of those areas. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and especially when you consider the elaborate system of the Order of the Golden Dawn, where it's hard to be sure if you're getting a tarot reading or an astrology reading.
Yeah, I use astrology a lot, and can, for certain periods of time when I was doing readings, I would always also get their astrological information, and I would do the numerology of their birthday and where they are currently. So I would do both numerology, astrology, and with a focus on tarot, because that's always been my thing. But for background, are they in the middle of a Saturn return? That's going to inform what's going on in their reading.
Let's talk about the use of tarot in magical rituals. I can imagine there must be many possibilities here.
Of course. The simplest one is that, the very simplest ritual can be to lay out a spread as if you have just received it, but you have handpicked all the cards to be in their absolutely perfect position for what you want to create. And therefore you look at this spread, usually a spread you know very well, so you instantly look at it and you see it as a whole, and it's absolutely perfect. It's already been created. It's here. And you go, oh, how wonderful, how exciting. And you maybe see some new pathways and some new connections that you hadn't seen before, but it really works. And I must admit, I've used that quite often in my life. So that you might call that a manifestation spread. It's not necessarily a formal ritual. If you want to do a formal ritual and all you have is a deck of cards and you're out in the countryside somewhere sitting under a tree, you can lay out an altar with the cards, because there's certain cards that are connected with fire, earth, air, and water that you can connect with the directions north, south, east, and west. And so you can lay those cards out, and the above and the below, whichever cards you associate with that, whatever spirit beings you want to call in, you can pick the cards that most closely represent those and call them in to your ritual at that moment. And so you've got like a formal altar and invocation through those cards. So that's another level that's more ritualistically oriented.
I know when we first spoke, I shared with you when I was a young person and relatively naive, I created a ritual. I used the tarot card of justice to invoke a situation which I felt needed to be resolved, and I got more justice than I had ever bargained for. So I think my own feeling is you need to be very careful when engaging in magical rituals because they do work, but if you don't understand what you're getting into, you may end up experiencing things you hadn't expected.
Exactly, because it can work on the outer level as well as the inner level. What justice do you need to confront or deal with and learn from in your own life, which can be sometimes a hard lesson. Yeah. Magic is always a two-way street. Be careful what you ask for. Isn't that one of the basic statements for manifestation?
Careful what you ask for. You might just get it.
Now, the other side of it is that one time my daughter really wanted an apartment in San Francisco where there were 300 people applying for it. And she said, "Mom, please help." So I laid out a magic spread of her getting the apartment. And I looked at it and, it was beautiful. It just fit her so well. And I could see this. And I said, "Yes, I've done the best I could. I really saw this apartment for you." And she got it. She got the apartment out of 300 people. So, a year later, she was moving in with her boyfriend. And they found another apartment and she said, "Mom, could you do this again? It's a wonderful apartment with hundreds of people applying for it." And I laid out one of those magic spreads and it wouldn't work. I kept changing cards and I would look at it and I would try to see her as getting the apartment and it just didn't gel. And I called her up and I said, "I'm sorry, Cassie, I just couldn't see it coming together no matter how hard I tried." So one of the things is that you can try something out, but of course we're all going to try and avoid the pattern that didn't really work or had a warning sign in it. That's part of the learning. I always wanted to write a book or have an anthology of people who work in the field of magic telling the story of the things that didn't work, where they really messed up and what they learned from it. Because we all make mistakes, especially with magic. You try to force the magic, which ceremonial magic sometimes does, often does. And then natural magic, which tries to get in touch more with the natural flow of energy so that you can work with it and kind of inch your way down a stream toward the bank that you want to get to.
Magic is a fascinating topic. My own sense of it is that it works quite well, but everybody has their own karma. And karma seems to be a principle that can override any other intention or ritual that you may engage in. Some things are simply not ready yet. I understand one of the principles of magic is you need to be patient.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and really feel that flow. To me, it's like being in a current and being aware of the current and where it can most potentially take you, where the dangers are, but to work with that. So, and then sometimes there's surprises.
Are there any other stories about your use of tarot that you would like to share with the New Thinking Aloud audience?
One of them, the major one, I think for me, in the work that I do, is that when you look at a card, you can bring up the meanings that you learned. It's good to have, 3 key words that you associate. So if you kind of don't know what to say, you can bring up one of those 3 words and it might trigger something. But the most important thing is to simply describe the card. No meaning, no symbolism, no expectations. Is there a person sitting on a horse? What are they wearing? What's in the foreground of the picture? What's in the background of the picture? And then take it a little deeper after you've done that. And actually, you should repeat that as an I statement. I am sitting on a horse wearing armor. looking off to the left while I'm holding this in my hand. And then you can go a little deeper by saying, and my attitude, my feelings, my assumptions in this card are. So being that figure in that card, how are you feeling about where you're going on this horse? How do you feel about the thing you're holding in their hand? What assumptions you have about what you can do with that? And state those as, I am holding this. I'm going in this direction because of something or other. And that's going to be probably the best introduction. I do interactive readings with people, so I take them through this process, and you can see the light bulbs going off in their head.
Well, Mary K. Greer, what a pleasure to be with you and to delve into your passion for tarot. I'm really excited to be able to share all of this with our audience, and I hope that we have you back more often, because I think you and I share something very special, which is having come of age in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 1970s, in which the human potential movement was really flourishing. So I took my passion in the direction of parapsychology, and you took your passion in the direction of tarot, but it feels like we both started with a similar foundation.
Yes, definitely. And I carry it through today, learning how to learn by inquiry, asking questions, especially of yourself.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to more conversations.
I do too. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you watching or listening, thank you for being with us, because you are the reason that we are here.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.